Come on, right here.
I don't need you to give them to me. I got my own key.
Shoot towards my boys,
Huh?
right here.
All right.
Yeah, straight in front of you.
Have you ever had somebody believe that you could do something that you didn't think you could do? I don't know if you'd seen that video before today, but it actually only happened 2 weeks ago. It happened on Memorial Day this year. And the man, David, in that video who takes the shot, he had been sitting indoors with his family when a couple of the kids came inside and challenged him to take a free throw, but he's blind. And I'm sure everybody thought, well, this is going to be hilarious, to see how much he misses by. But you'll notice that the kid who shot the video, that was his nephew, by the way. The kid who shot his video was standing right beneath the basket. I don't know if you heard what he said. He said, "Shoot towards my voice." And then the uncle kind of wasn't sure who was there, and he said, "I'm right here." And then he took the shot, he shot towards his voice, and he made it. And it's an incredible thing when you can do something that maybe you didn't even think you could do. Over the past few weeks, we've been in this series called Hero Maker, where we've been looking at this idea that one of our really important roles is to help other people become all that God has designed them to be. In other words, to do the incredible stuff God has designed for them. Well, have you had that kind of an experience where somebody's kind of pulled something out of you where, man, you just didn't know it was there? Sometimes it's because you were unaware of it. Other times, it's because they saw something in you that maybe you didn't want them to see. Like, I don't want to have that gifting. I don't want to have that ability, but yet it sort of gets pulled out of you. And it's incredible when people can recognize those gifts and you can step into them. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a story where God does this. He actually calls out an ability in someone that they didn't think they had. And in looking at this story closely, I think what we'll do is we'll learn a lot about how God sees potential in people and what we can do about that. Our story today is from the book of Exodus. And if you're unfamiliar with the Bible, Exodus is the second book of the Bible. And I understand, some of you maybe, you're new to church, you're new to faith, you're just kicking the tires around here. And when I say Exodus, you're like, I thought that was a Bob Marley song. Right? Some of you didn't even know we have a 420 service. Now, those of you who don't get that joke, ask anyone under 25 or anyone wearing a tie-dyed shirt after service and they will explain that joke to you. The book of Exodus is this incredible story, and there's so much that happens in it that we're not going to be able to cover all of it today. But it really tells the story of the people of Israel fleeing the oppression of Pharaoh in Egypt and making their way through the desert under the leadership of a man named Moses. And there's so much that happens in the book. Again, we can't get into all of it today, but what we're going to do is focus on this dynamic where God calls Moses to do something that Moses is pretty sure he can't do. And I'll give you the quick scenario. So Exodus begins with the people of Israel, God's people. They're oppressed and they're enslaved in Egypt. So God calls Moses and he says, hey, here's your job. Is you need to lead these people out of slavery and into a place called the Promised Land. And the Promised Land is really what they've been yearning for all this time. But in order to do this, in order to get them out of this oppression, Moses has to confront Pharaoh. And you have to understand, Pharaoh he's sort of like, you understand him as a monarch, as a king, but he's really more than that. He's understood to be the intermediary between the gods and the people. And he would also be understood to own everything, all of the property, all of the everything in Egypt. So the level of his power is absolute. And nobody in their right mind would confront Pharaoh. So for Moses to do what God's asking him to do, and this is really no big deal, he just has to confront the most powerful man in the world and convince him, hey, I need you to release all of your slaves, all of your free labor, everybody who does everything for you for free, just let them go. Yeah, I'm sure that Pharaoh's going to receive that very, very well. And so Moses, understandably, is very reluctant to do this, to confront Pharaoh, because, death and stuff. So he expresses his doubts, but God says, no, this is the plan, and you're the guy. And this brings us to this first truth that winds up being revealed to us in the story, which is this: God sees potential in us that we don't see in ourselves. There's this incredible moment in the 4th chapter, Exodus 4, where God is telling Moses, okay, go to the Pharaoh and tell him to let the people of Israel go. And Moses is expressing all of his doubts and all of his misgivings about this idea. He's scared, he's reluctant, and he's convinced that there's a really big single weakness to this plan. And the plan, the weakness in the plan is that Moses is supposed to give this convincing argument to Pharaoh, right? And Moses is not very good at talking. And that's kind of a problem. Here's what Moses says to God. Moses pleaded with the Lord, "Oh Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now, even though you've spoken to me. I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled." Then the Lord asked Moses, "Who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say." So God has called Moses to do this thing, and Moses is very quick to go, no, God, you don't understand. I'm not good at that. I'm not a good talker out louder. I'm not good with words. I stumble over what I'm supposed to say. And God's response is great. God doesn't go, "Oh, come on, buck up, little camper. I'm sure you're good at this. You can do this." That's not what God does. God goes, "Who made your mouth? Who gave you the ability to speak? Anything that's in you, I put there. So if I say it's there, it's there. Go do it." Which is a little bit different from the sort of encouragement and a little arm around the shoulder that we would maybe expect or want to hear. And it gives us the second learning from the story, which is this: God challenges us to use the gifts that we don't believe we have. It's more than just recognizing them. It's that God's saying, okay, now that it's there, you got to go do something with it. You might think that that's the same as the first point that we made, but it's not. It's actually very different. See, the first thing, God identifies the potential in Moses, but he doesn't say, "Oh, sit around." Well, think about how you might use that. Just contemplate the idea of giftedness. He says, no. Go do it. Do something with this. And you might think, man, if God told Moses to go do this, that's got to fill Moses with confidence, right? Like he's got to feel, okay, God said I could do it, I'm going to do it. So what does Moses do? Well, he does exactly what we all do. He completely caves and buckles under the pressure. Look at what happens in the scripture. But Moses again pleaded, "Lord, please send anyone else." Then the Lord became angry with Moses. "All right," he said. "What about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he speaks well. And look, he's on his way to meet you now. He'll be delighted to see you. Talk to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with both of you as you speak, and I will instruct you both in what to do. Aaron will be your spokesman to the people." I love Moses' response to God. He didn't say, "Lord, send someone else." He said, "Send anyone else. Lord, anybody but me. I don't care who it is, just not me." He's not suggesting names. He's just, "Lord, just let it not be me. Anybody would do fine." And God's response is great. I don't know if you grew up like I did, when they would read the scriptures in a service, and whenever they said what God said, it sort of had this tone. And so God would have said, "All right, find your brother Aaron the Levite." I don't think God said it that way. I think God had maybe a little bit more of a tone, where he's like, "All right, get your brother." Right? Kind of the way you talk to your kids sometimes. Not yours, I'm sure that only happens in my house, right? But the idea, like, get your brother, okay? I'll tell you what to say, and then you can tell him and he can say it. Okay, will we do that? Is that fine? You see, God's not letting Moses off the hook and saying, find somebody else and I'll use their gifting. He's saying, find somebody else, I'm still gonna use yours. It's gonna run through you, but we're gonna involve your brother. We're gonna involve Aaron. And God promises to be with both of them. But don't miss, God's still saying, Moses, I'm giving you the words. Now you can pass them on to Aaron, but the words are coming through you. God is still challenging Moses, use the gift I gave you. So what do? Well, they go, and before they talk to Pharaoh, they go to the elders of the people of Israel. And they say, okay, God's got a plan here. And you'll notice in this passage, Aaron is the one who actually does the talking. It says this, "Then Moses and Aaron returned to Egypt and called all the elders of Israel together. Aaron told them everything the Lord had told Moses, and Moses performed the miraculous signs as they watched. Then the people of Israel were convinced that the Lord had sent Moses and Aaron." If you've got a paper copy of the outline, I want you to circle the words "Aaron told them." If you're using the Eastlake Church app on your phone, get a Sharpie and just draw on the screen of your phone. Moses obviously had this great potential and was using it, but he was kind of too scared to lean into it. So Aaron is the one who's doing the public speaking. And remarkably, it worked. The people of Israel were convinced. So they decide, Moses and Aaron, okay, we're going to see Pharaoh. And here's what happens. This is on screen. It's not in your outline. After this presentation to Israel's leaders, okay, so after they've talked to the people of Israel, Moses and Aaron went and spoke to Pharaoh. They told him, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go so they may hold a festival in my honor in the wilderness." Don't miss that it says they told him. That's a subtle, but it's a really important detail. See, the first time that there was any speaking to people, Moses said, "Okay, Aaron, hey, I need you to say this," and then Aaron would say it. Now, in this next passage that we just read, Moses and Aaron speak to Pharaoh. Moses is actually starting to step forward into his gifting. He was maybe starting to believe that what God said about him was true. Moses was beginning to speak. And I know it's tempting, especially in our day and age, to think that what happened was Moses kind of gained confidence. Like he started to believe in himself, and so he took a step forward in faith. But honestly, I think that's incorrect. I don't think that's really what it was, because I think confidence is a little overrated. Unpopular opinion alert, I think we maybe have a little too much confidence in our day and age. We perhaps think a little too highly of ourselves. And it's not really about confidence. See, Moses hadn't gained confidence. He'd gained trust. There's a difference. See, confidence is when you believe that what you say about yourself is true. Trust is when you believe that what God says about you is true. There's a world of difference between those things. And Moses leaned into that trust. Don't miss that difference, because it's all about believing what God says. See, I can say and think a lot about what I'm capable of, but it might not be true. I might think I'm great at something, and I might not be. I might think I'm terrible at something, and I might not be. So we walk around and we get so caught up in what we think about ourselves. And I would encourage you to do the same thing I try to do for myself, which is I try to approach what I say and think about myself with a lot of skepticism. I try to be a little skeptical about what I say about me, but I try to really hold tight to what God says about me, because that turns out to be a lot more stable, a lot more accurate, and a lot more true. And having that sort of trust in God becomes important because of this third point, which is this: God isn't deterred when we don't succeed right away. Jumping back to our story in Exodus, in that last verse, so Moses and Aaron had asked the Pharaoh, okay, we want to go out into the desert for 3 days to worship God. And in response, Pharaoh didn't just say no. He said no, and then he punished the people of Israel for being so bold as to even ask. He was outraged that they would ask for the opportunity to go in the desert for 3 days to worship the Lord. So he chose to punish them. And so he made their work even harder. They had been making bricks. He said, now you have to make bricks without straw. And the people of Israel were just outraged by this. And they were mostly mad, not so much at Pharaoh, but at Moses and Aaron. Like, you got us in trouble with the Pharaoh. Like, thanks for nothing, guys. Why did you do this? You got us in so much trouble. So this fear that Moses had, like, hey, I shouldn't be speaking in front of people, it sort of becomes justified, because in the eyes of the people of Israel, he blew it. It had gone very, very poorly. And in response to that, God sees that the people of Israel are now mad at Moses. Pharaoh said no, so that didn't work. The people of Israel are mad. It looks like kind of a disaster already. And God doesn't go, hey, well, at least you tried. No, that's not what God does. God goes, here's what I need you to do. Go back to Pharaoh again. Even though you failed the first time, even though that didn't work, And this time, I don't want you to ask for a 3-day festival out in the desert. This time, I want you to ask him, hey, let the people go. Tell them it's time. We're just leaving the country permanently. And just float that idea before Pharaoh. This is impossible. It's an impossible request. The people of Israel, understand, they do all of the work in Egypt. They're the laborers. Pharaoh is not going to say yes to this, and here's how it plays out. The Lord said to Moses, "Go back to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and tell him to let the people of Israel leave his country." "But Lord," Moses objected, "my own people won't listen to me anymore. How can I expect Pharaoh to listen? I'm such a clumsy speaker." He's still saying, God, this thing you're calling me to do, I'm not good at it. And Moses' words are striking. He's saying, my people won't listen to me anymore. I have failed. Everybody hates me. And this gives you, unfortunately, kind of a hard truth about God's calling in your life. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but, well, here I am. Just because God sees potential in your life doesn't mean you're going to be good at it right away. It doesn't mean you'll achieve success at it right away. And it sure doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Most of the time, as we walk out this calling God has on our lives, we're going to struggle in the process. You know, as a pastor, I will have people come and talk to me, and they'll say, man, I thought God was calling me to do this thing with my life, and it's turning out to be really hard and really discouraging, and I'm failing at it. And I guess I don't think God was really calling me to do it in the first place, because it's just not working. And because I'm thoughtful and caring, I usually say something like, you thought it was going to be easy? Oh, that's cute. Because that's not how it works. It doesn't play out like that. You're going to struggle and you're going to fail and you're going to wonder if you were really called by God in the first place. And you know what you do? You keep listening to God's voice. You keep doing what he said to do. You keep shooting at that space where you heard his voice, just like the guy taking the free throw. You heard God call you from there, keep going in that direction. Because even if you're not good at it right away, there's a reason he's calling you there. And the struggle is going to make you better. Now, I'm going to quickly summarize what happens in the story next, because there's a lot that goes on next after Moses has this conversation with Pharaoh. Pharaoh, of course, refuses to let the people of Israel go. I mean, no one is surprised by this. And God pushes back on Pharaoh. And what God does and how he achieves this is he sends a series of plagues. These are like these horrible calamities that befall the nation of Egypt. And if you look it up, there's like 10 terrible plagues that befall the whole nation. There are things like the water in the Nile turns to blood. There's the plague of frogs. There's the plague of gnats and flies. There's hail. There's fire. There are locusts that swarm the land. At one point, there's like a 24-hour marathon of Nicolas Cage movies. It's awful, is what I'm saying. It's unimaginable horror for the people of Egypt. And these plagues keep building and building and getting worse and worse, and ratcheting up the pressure until finally there's a final plague. And you may know it as the plague of the firstborn. And basically what happens is, in a single night, all of the firstborn sons of all of the families of Egypt die in one night. And the people of Israel, their children are safe. But the firstborn son in every Egyptian family dies in one night. You may know this if you know the Jewish tradition of Passover. It remembers this particular night when that death passed over the people of Israel. They did not die, but all these Egyptian families suffered a death of their firstborn son, including the Pharaoh's own family. His firstborn son dies. And that's what breaks it. The Pharaoh actually calls for Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night. And he tells them, go, just get your people and leave. And so they do. They leave, and I'm going to zoom ahead in the story. They begin their journey into the promised land, and there's a lot that happens. And if you read Exodus, and I really would encourage you to read Exodus. It's a fascinating book, and there's so much in there. They go, and of course Pharaoh changes his mind, and he sends his troops after them, and the people of Israel cross the Red Sea. The waters part, they cross, and they get through, and Pharaoh's soldiers and all of that are coming after them, and the waters crash upon them, and it's just all this crazy stuff is happening. And then the people of Israel begin their long journey through the desert to the promised land, and it doesn't go all that well. It's really hard, and they struggle, and they suffer, and they begin to complain, and they begin to worship things other than God. And finally, they get to the point where they say, it would be better for us to be back in Egypt than to be out here in the desert. Now think about that. They're having such a bad time in the desert that they're saying, it would be better for us to go back and be enslaved than to be out here. That's the point they've gotten to in their hearts, and they're just complaining about everything. And as all of this struggle is going on, Moses is growing in his leadership, and he's growing in his ability to speak to all the people. And there comes a point where Moses goes up this mountain, and God gives him what we now know to be the 10 Commandments. And in this process, there's all of this stuff that's happening as God's communicating with Moses, and the people are away, but they're seeing there's thunder and lightning, there's trumpets, there's smoke, there's all of this stuff. And the people of Israel become absolutely terrified. And this remarkable thing happens. When the people heard the thunder and the loud blast of the ram's horn, and when they saw the flashes of lightning and the smoke billowing from the mountain, they stood at a distance, trembling with fear. And they said to Moses, you speak to us, and we will listen. But don't let God speak directly to us, or we will die. Do you see how now, in many ways, this journey of calling that God put on Moses, it's kind of complete. It's kind of near its end here, because remember where this started. Moses didn't want to speak at all. So God gave the words to his brother. God gave the words to Moses so he could give them to his brother. So God would ultimately allow Aaron to be the voice. And then in the middle, Moses and Aaron would speak together to the people of Israel and to the Pharaoh. And now Moses on his own was speaking to the people of Israel. And the people of Israel who had hated him, who had pushed back at him, who had been so angry with him back in the beginning, are now saying, please only let you speak to us, Moses. We'll die if we hear directly from God. You're the one we want to hear from. I mean, that's a remarkable journey. And you'd think, well, this must be where the story ends, right? Moses is the hero. The people love him, and they respect his leadership, and they're just going to waltz into the promised land, and that must be the way the story ends. But that's not the way the story ends. There's something more that needs to happen, and it's this. God reminds us that we aren't the hero of the story. You see, if you and I are writing the story of Exodus, here's how we probably write the ending, is the people embrace Moses as their leader. He embraces his gifting as a leader and a speaker. And then they together go into the promised land, hands over their head, this is awesome, slow-mo, running into the promised land. And they're dumping buckets of Gatorade over his head, and they're high-fiving, we did it, we reached the promised land, yeah. But that's not what happens. What happens is this. Then Moses called Joshua and said to him in the presence of all the people of Israel, be determined and confident, you are the one who will lead these people to occupy the land that the Lord promised to their ancestors. The Lord himself will lead you and be with you. He will not fail you or abandon you, so do not lose courage or be afraid. So, hold on, wait. Moses doesn't get to be the hero? Moses doesn't get to waltz into the promised land? It's going to be somebody else? That's the way the story works. See, what Moses does is he lets everybody know, no, Joshua is going to be the leader. And he tells Joshua, don't be discouraged, don't be afraid, have courage. All the things that Moses didn't do at the beginning. He's saying, no, you're the one that's going to do this. And he says it in front of everyone so that they know and respect, this is the new leader. And then this is what happens. Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with wisdom. Why? Because Moses had appointed him to be his successor. The people of Israel obeyed Joshua and kept the commands that the Lord had given them through Moses. See, all along when we read the story, we think the moral of the story is, well, I guess God's the hero maker and Moses is the hero. But that's not how it works. See, Moses actually becomes the hero maker for Joshua. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. And if you've been here for the whole Hero Maker series, it might disappoint you that this is the conclusion of the series, but it's the truth. And that's this. Hero makers don't make heroes. Hero makers make other hero makers. See, I know we've been saying all along that what we do is we set the table so that other people can be the heroes. But the truth is, our job is actually to set the table so that other people can set the table. To set the table for other people who then set the table for other people, and so on and so on and so on. And you may be wondering, well, wait, the series is called Hero Maker. If we're making other hero makers instead of making heroes, why did you call the series Hero Maker? Well, quite honestly, because Hero Maker sounds weird. We're not the heroes. We're not supposed to be. The reason this is the case is because there's only one hero in the story, and the hero of the story is Jesus. It turns out our job wasn't ever to make more heroes. Our job has always been to make other hero makers who make other hero makers who make other hero makers, and so on and so on and so on. And the reason we are here 2,000 years after the resurrection of Jesus is for generations there have been hero makers that have made other hero makers that have made other hero makers, and now it's up to us to pass that on and to pass that forward. And that's how this works. And in that process, what we do, every last one of us, is we point to the one true hero of the story, which is Jesus. That's how that works. And so your job and my job is to do all the stuff we've talked about in this series. We look for the good in others. We encourage others. We invest in others. We see potential in them that they don't see in themselves. And while we do that, our responsibility is to point them not to us, not to other heroes, but to Jesus, and to encourage them. Listen to his voice. Listen to his encouragement in the process. Why? Because he sees the good in them. He sees the good in you. He's ready to encourage them. He's ready to encourage you. He's ready to invest in them, and he's ready to invest in you. It's not going to be easy, and you can, and quite honestly, you will get discouraged in the process. It's inevitable. The people you invest in are going to get discouraged. They may even at times give up. But if God has called you to do something, keep shooting towards that voice. And as you invest in other people and they get discouraged and they wonder, like, man, did God really call me to do this? Tell them. Keep shooting towards his voice. Because if instead of aiming at everything that the world says we ought to aim at, this really takes us back to where this series started. Instead of looking to make ourselves at the pinnacle of everything, if we aim for really valuing what Jesus values, if we have that opportunity, what we can do is we can be true hero makers that point to the one and only true hero of the story, and that's Jesus. Will you pray with me? God, I thank you for placing potential in us and encouraging us to step forward and use it. Help us to be encouragers of other people, to keep developing their gifting and keep moving towards you. As we wrap up this series, help us to be the hero maker makers who invest in others, who can ultimately join us in pointing towards you and bringing greater glory to your name. Amen. As a way of concluding our series, what we're going to do right now is we're going to have a song that talks about keeping Jesus at the center. He's the true hero of the story. And oftentimes when we play a song at the end of service, we sort of call them sit and consider songs. And you know, that you think about the words of the song and you think about what God's calling you to do and you sort of ponder it. And this song, I want you to do that, but also this one's a little bit more of a gospel tune. And it's going to have a little bit more of a beat to it. And you might shimmy a little bit in your chair during this one. I'm sorry you had to see that. But for some of you, this is going to take you back to church. And I mean like CHERCH, church, right? And so I want you to enjoy the song and think about the words of this song telling us that it's Jesus that's the hero. And after the song, I'll come back with a few words before we're dismissed.